I'm Brad Rosen. I'm the president and head of revenue operations at Sales Assembly, and I'm going to be talking to you about how to beat tool fatigue. So I think without any further ado, let's jump in, and excited to chat with you today. So first, I want to go over a quick agenda. We're going to talk about the current state of the tech stack. We're going to talk about what that means and why we should care about our tech stack and what that looks like. We'll talk about how to optimize your tech stack for maximum productivity. And then lastly, we'll talk about how to track the effectiveness of each tool to determine its viability. So let's jump right in. The first thing is the current tech stack and what it looks like. It's obviously a lot. People are buying new software left and right. We have everything from CRM to marketing automation. We have messaging apps, we have video apps, and all of these tools seem to be coming together. Everybody wants to be a platform these days. Everybody wants to use different tools, and they're acquiring different tools to make everything one. And so it becomes a headache, frankly, right? As to which tools are we using, which tools should we be using, and ultimately, are we just ultimately using too many tools to make ourselves productive? So let's talk about that. The current market, there was 172 billion being spent in 2022 on SaaS, which is astronomical. And 18% year over year of growth rate from the SaaS market. So it's only growing bigger, which is also pretty astounding. And from that, though, 64% of companies plan on buying 5+ pieces of software tools in the coming year. So not only do we have a ton of tools, but we're going to continue to expand as we go. And that becomes problematic because ultimately there's only so much capacity for your team to have to be able to use enough tools efficiently to make them worthwhile. And then there's a law of diminishing returns that you're going to hit to where you're actually becoming less efficient or just wasteful with your spend on software. So why should we care, though, is really the most important thing to think about. What happens when you have a large tech stack? So first of all, it can become confusing for end users as to which systems are important. We have many systems, some of which are doing many of the same things. And the end user really needs to understand what's important to be able to understand how they can best do their job. And if there are conflicting issues with different systems as to which is more important than another, then it's really going to become confusing, and you're going to have data in many different places. So that really makes it hard to ensure that people are adhering to the processes that you're putting in place. And so that may mean the way that your sales team is being run. That may mean certain expectations as to where data is being input and at what times. And if we can't follow those processes, then we're not going to have an efficient and effective sales process. Furthermore, it's going to take resources to implement, manage, and provide support for each of these additional pieces of software. So we don't only want to think about the price of the software as far as dollars and cents, but who's going to actually go in and learn how this software works and implement the software, which could take weeks, it could take months, it could take a long time to implement this software. And then we have ongoing management of the software that also has to take place. So we're using resources to do this. And then couple that with the idea that there needs to be support resources in place to be able to answer questions, get people up and running. New folks who are hired, how are they going to train and learn and adapt on the programs? That also is all going to add to your bottom line and your overall CAC. And so the more software we buy, we're paying for the software. We're also paying for resources for that software. And so ultimately, that can provide a large overhead for a business that's trying to grow. So let's talk about how to optimize your stack, which is ultimately one of the most important things when you think about what pieces of software you have. And really, I bucket this into 3 different buckets to think about how to optimize your stack. So the first is the software should solve business problems. We all fall into the shiny tool syndrome. We see that somebody raised $20 million or $50 million. It happens basically daily these days. And we're like, oh, that tool sounds really interesting. Or my old coworker, maybe a friend of mine works at this new company. They have a really cool startup. We should really look at this tool. When in reality, you should be defining gaps or problems that you're trying to solve for your business before searching for a tool. So if you have issues with lead generation, or you have issues with closing certain deals and understanding the sales process, then you should search for tools that solve those problems and not find tools that solve certain problems and then understand whether they're applicable to your business. That way, you aren't buying superfluous tools. And ultimately, the software should help you execute on your secondary goals that are proven inputs to your company objectives. So whether those are V2 MOM or KPIs, OKRs, they're going to be secondary goals that are proven based on data as to what inputs are super important to driving revenue. And if you can find tools that are going to help those inputs be more efficient and effective, that's where your key is going to come from to searching for the best type of software for you. So you really want to think about also the software should be multidimensional. Tools should be able to be used cross-functionally, right? So you really want to look at the idea of like, can it be used for sales and CS and BDRs? Is that possible? Maybe, maybe not. But you really ultimately also want to make sure that the information within the tools can be shared. And so that you have one data source that can pull in information from these disparate tools so that you can see the business as a whole and understand how you're doing. And last thing, tools should be able to scale with your business as you grow. So don't purchase tools for today, purchase tools for today and tomorrow. You don't want to buy something just because it's a little cheaper if it's not going to scale with you as you grow, because you're going to find out that you have more problems later on, really, if you do that. So you want to make sure that it will scale with you depending on what your goals are in the upcoming next few years. Last thing, always be evaluating. Software and needs change quickly, so stay open-minded. Software adapts, as I'm sure a lot of you work at software companies. Your company's changing very quickly, and so are the software providers. So you always want to stay up to date on what the new features and functionality are, and your needs are going to change quickly. So something that may not have been relevant to you a year or two ago when you evaluated the tool may be relevant to you, or potentially the software vendor you evaluated before now has something that they've added in the recent future to help you with your solutions. Did you know that 40% of people say they will renew current software without any evaluation? I actually found that astounding. I get that you're already, Ryan's already outgrowing his CRM, so he knows what I'm talking about. You want to make sure that you are, scaling as you grow. But when you think about this, I think a lot of people are just content with the status quo and they'll use what they have. But when something comes up for renewal, think about evaluations and learnings. They are free. You can talk to salespeople. You can go get certifications, watch things, either on sessions like these or on YouTube or other places. You can learn a lot, free trials about other pieces of software without having to sign up for them. So I would utilize that to ensure that you're getting the most out of your software. So how are we going to ensure effectiveness? Number one, we're going to track user sentiment. So use NPS or other tools to track the sentiment of every piece of software. You should have a spreadsheet or some other, maybe you have a software to track your software NPS, but some other tool that's going to track the NPS and understand every role, how they like the software. So your end users may love a piece of software, but your admin may really hate it, or vice versa. And that actually is very telling. Now, does that mean that you would stop using a software because one or the other doesn't like using it? That's a business decision. But ultimately, you should understand different roles within your organization and how each of them prefer different software relative to another, and continue to track it over time. This obviously may ebb and flow as things go on. So for instance, someone in the chat, Ryan, said that he's outgrowing his CRM. They might have loved the CRM 2 years ago, but now they're not so sure. So you want to continue to track that as your business grows. Second, you want to determine utilization. G2 Track actually says that $40 billion is wasted on unused software every single year, which is shocking. It's shocking in that number is that big, but I think any of us that have been at software companies understand that there's always waste, whether it's underutilization or we buy it for a piece of software for the whole sales team and only the enterprise team is using it, or only the SMB team is using it, but everybody has a license. So you want to track usage across the team over time. You want to be able to see how people are using each tool and then plot that against overall performance to determine if the tools are valuable. So it's not just beneficial if people are using it if the tools aren't valuable, and vice versa. If the tools are valuable but people aren't using it, then that's an issue as well. So you want to understand the give and take between the two of those. Obviously, we want tools that are beneficial and people are using, but you do want to understand the trade-off between those two. And then you want to determine if different teams are utilizing software in different capacities, because you may have, again, you have a tool that your BDRs and your AEs are using. One team is using it significantly more than the other. Is it worth your time and money to have both teams using that tool? So determining utilization is obviously key in understanding whether you should add more seats or reduce seats, potentially look at other tools altogether. And then we want to eliminate redundancies. So we want to reconsider point solutions if you have a platform that does the same thing. This is not like a tried and true rule. You may have certain point solutions that are extremely valuable and you really need to use them, even though your platform has the same functionality. So you might think Pardot and HubSpot, right? But don't let perfect be the enemy of good. Having something that is fully integrated and 70, 80, 90% of the way there and can solve most of your business issues may be just as good as purchasing a brand new piece of software, spending more money, working on integrations, trainings, learnings, all of this, just because it solves 100% of your issues. So think about how much time and effort it's going to go into purchasing that extra piece of software and implementing it. And is that trade-off worth it to get potentially only a little incremental more value out of that tool? And to help with that, you want to train your team on full functionality of all tools. And many times it's the end users who understand certain pieces of the software that even administrators aren't necessarily always thinking about because they're not always fully understanding what the end user's pain points are. And so those users, if they're fully trained, may be able to find other ways to use the software, whether that be workarounds or ways to customize your instances to be able to really maximize the benefits of the software you're using. They can also keep up on, like we said, releases and new product information that comes out regularly. So let's put it all together here. Large stacks can be detrimental to your business, so keep that in mind. Bigger isn't always better. And I would encourage you that if you're going to continue to take on more tools, as the survey kind of shows many people will, you should also reevaluate your current tools and don't be part of the 40% that is just going to automatically renew every single tool. Maybe you take on some new tools and you purge other tools, but continue to look at your tool set as a whole in functionality to say, do we need all these tools and what business problems are they solving? That's the key. What are our business problems? And is this tool set that we have currently solving those business problems? If not, we should reevaluate. Software should be multidimensional. It should be able to go across department as well as share information all into one database to be able to share the information and then make business decisions off of it. And lastly, effective software management requires sentiment tracking, utilization maximization, and reduction of dependencies. So that's what I had for you. I think we have a few questions in the chat. What's a good strategy to develop a tool budget? Jeremy, I think that's a great question. I think you should really think about, there's a few ways to think about it. Number one is a percentage of revenue. There are some great pieces out there. If you Google it, I don't want to give specific percentages. It depends on your business, who you're selling to, what your outreach strategy is. So if you're like product-led growth versus sales-led growth, but you do want to think about a percentage of your team, because also keep in mind that it's not just about how much you're spending to make your team efficient, but also salespeople and attracting talent. They want to see that you have the right tools to make them effective. And so it's actually a talent acquisition and retention tool as well. So I want to thank everybody for your time. I'm Brad at salesassembly.com if anyone has any more questions, and really appreciate chatting with you all today, and have a wonderful day.